What's going on, my super fam? So how have you been faring with Silverwolf? I hope that any of you who have been waiting and wanted to pull for her have been able to pull, because while it is Silverwolf and I know that many of us have been looking forward to her. And luckily enough for me, I did manage to win my 50-50 on my stream. I do stream quite frequently on YouTube, guys, so be sure to check out my stream as I would love to hang out with you guys. But now in the past few days, I have been able to test her out a lot. I basically have a pretty good idea of how Silverwolf is performing at the current patch and whether or not she's a fitting character for you to be pulling for, especially if you are a free-to-play player at this point, and also look into her future potential as well. And so with that in mind, let's just dive into today's video. First, we kind of want to have a look into her traces real quick once again so that you have a really good understanding of what is it exactly that she does. She is a nihility character, so basically the majority of things she do is basically going to be debuffing your enemies. For a basic attack, it is something that is the same for most of the characters. Now my traces are something that I'm upgrading it to level 7 because I am at Trailblazer level 50, which is, I believe, something that majority of us have already gotten here. So at the level 4 right now, she'll be doing quantum damage equal to 80% of her attack, and of course that number will rise even higher when she hits level 7. Her talent is what make up her kit because she has the ability to create 3 types of bug that reduces attack, defense, or speed, and every time she attacks she has a base 67% chance to implant a random bug that actually lasts for 3 turns on the target enemy. Now of course this number can rise a bit even higher when we're able to ascend her to the next ascension, so I believe that this number will be around 70 when we hit the cap. Her skill is something that's very important to her and makes up her main kit, and also something that makes Silverwolf stands out from the majority, as well as actually meta changing within the patch, because whenever she uses a skill, there's a 81% base chance of adding 1 weakness from your team to the target enemy, and also reducing the damage resistance to that weakness type by 20% for 2 turns. This is basically randomly chosen, guys. So for example, if your team have like, quantum damage as well as ice and then electro damage, whenever she uses her skills, she will be randomly choosing that weakness type to implant on the enemy. Now there's also a second part to her skill, is that if the enemies already have that type of weakness already, the effect damage resistance reduction to that weakness type will not be triggered. One enemy can only have 1 weakness implanted by Silverwolf, and whenever she uses it again, only the most recent implant weakness will be kept. And in addition, there's a 100 base chance to reduce all type resistance of the enemies by 9% for a 2 turns, and then also dealing 159 quantum damage, which is really nice. So technically speaking, her skills is the bread and butter of your team building, and of course we'll be discussing a more team building in the team build sections. Her ult is also absolutely important, guys. You always want to have your ult on as much as possible because there is a 92 base chance to decrease the target enemies of 40% defense for 3 turns, and at the same time dealing a lot of quantum damage up to 300%. But the most important thing is indeed the defense decrease, because guys, a 40% decrease is no joke. That is very high, and you get the benefit of it for a 3 turn. So if you are having your energy regen on Silverwolf properly, by the time this defense decrease ends, she technically should be able to have a burst up again, and that is really nice. However, you do need to have a lot of energy regen investment onto her to do so, so that's something for you to look out for. Other than that, guys, she has an amazing technique which I really suggest you to use basically every single time. Is that because she will be able to reduce toughness of all the enemies on the field regardless of their weakness, and that is pretty much insane. And whenever she breaks their weakness, she will be applying quantum weakness break effect, and that is really nice for you to start off the match, especially especially when you're clearing out small mobs, should be helping you out to finish off the battle real fast. She also have really good bonus ability when ascending. First one does give a box duration extension for 1 turn, and that is really nice. And also every time an enemy is inflicted with weakness brick, there's a 65% chance that Silver Wolf will implant a random bug onto the enemy. Second bonus ability allows that the duration of the weakness implanted by Silver Wolf's skills is increased by 1 turn, and that will turn to 3. If you remember, there's a part that says she's able to reduce all type of resistance on enemies further by a 2 turn. This is increased to a 3 turn, and that is really decent. And whenever you get to A6, if there are 3 or more debuff affecting the enemy when the skill is used, then it will decrease the all type of resistance by an additional 3%. So overall, as you can see guys, Silver Wolf is everything surrounding debuff, from implanting the enemies with bug types to defense resistance decrease from her ult, and her skills of implanting weakness type onto the enemies, which is really good. And I believe that she might be the only character in the game for a very long time that has this ability, because I can't really see Hoyoverse providing this type of skills to most of the other character that's going to be coming later down the road, which is indeed the selling point of Silver Wolf. So on paper, everything is looking really good for Silver Wolf, but what about when it comes to actual battle? Since guys, she relies insanely a lot on her debuff and not the actual attack stats, because while even though she does deal a bit of damage to your team, it's not going to be that significant. You're going to be relying everything on effect hit rate, because without it, you're not going to be able to land a single debuff onto your enemy, making Silver Wolf not a very usable character on the team. Therefore guys, Silver Wolf is not a very good character when it comes to early game, where you don't have access to a lot of good relics to help her out with her build, especially effect hit rate, as well as the planetary set, where it does give you the effect hit rate stats as well. Because remember guys, on top of the percentage of the effect hit rate your character has, there's also the effect resistance stats on your enemies, and generally guys, most of them has at least around 10 to 20% effect hit resistance, and sometimes the enemies can have buff that helps it to get even higher stats than that. So if your Silver Wolf is not able to actually apply debuff onto your enemies, it also means that she's basically helping nothing out of your team, making relic building guys the most important part of her kit. So when it comes to her relic stats, obviously we're going to be going with the quantum damage bonus set alongside with the pan-galactic commercial enterprise, which gives you the wearer's effect hit rate increased by 10% and also increasing their attack by an amount that is equal to 25% of the effect hit rate, which is the perfect relic set for her. As for the stats guys, the body you really would want to have effect hit rate, and generally speaking guys, the minimum requirement you want to have on her is 50% to at least a 90% effect hit rate, because again, I can't stress this enough, effect hit rate is the most important part of her kit. Now if you do feel that you're having enough effect hit rate already, then body you can actually think about crit rate, and that is still fine. The build, we will be going with speed, because as always, the more turns she's having, the more chance she's able to inflict debuff onto your enemies. The rope guys is gonna be energy regen, because she wants a lot of her ult uptime, since remember her ult decreases your enemy defense by a ton while also doing decent damage to them as well. And the sphere is definitely gonna be quantum damage bonus. Now something about having Silver Wolf right now is when it comes to her light cones, because in this patch we're actually getting a free light cone dedicated to Silver Wolf. You just need to complete the event and basically you're getting an R5 free weapon that can actually get you up to a 40% effect hit rate increase and a lot of energy regen when you're attacking defense decrease enemies, and that is really nice, especially when Silver Wolf needs a lot of ult uptime. So that's a perfect part already. Now since this is a Silver Wolf video, I want to have a quick look onto her Eidolons because I know that some of us might be, tempted to pull for her Eidolons here and there. So we'll be discussing whether or not how impactful it is to her build. For her E1, after using her ult, Silver Wolf regenerates 7 energy for every debuff that the target enemy currently has. This effect can be triggered up to 5 times. So technically a maximum of 35 energy regen, which is kind of nice, not the most impactful, but also can be pretty beneficial for her because of how much energy she needs for her ult. Her E2, when enemy enters the battle, reduces their effect resistance by 20%. Now this is actually nice, guys, because again, her effect hit rate stat is the most important, and just whenever the enemies enters the battle, their effect resistance is already decreased by 20% for the whole of the match, and she's going to be able to make use of this really nice. Her E4, after using her ult, she'll be dealing additional quantum damage equal to 20% of Silver Wolf attack for every debuff currently is on the enemy, and that's going to be a maximum of 5 stacks, so basically more damage onto her ult. And for her E6, for every debuff the target enemies has, the damage dealt by Silver Wolf is increased by 20% up to a limit of 100%. So once again, this is kind of like basically helping your Silver Wolf to do more damage for the team, and also it is E6, so there's going to be a lot of investment for you to look into. So overall, guys, getting her all the way up to E2 is going to be the most beneficial for you, of helping her a lot with energy regen as well as effect resistance decrease onto the enemies. That's going to be the perfect investment if you do have the ability to invest into Silver Wolf. And now we move on to one of the most important discussion when it comes to Silver Wolf earlier on, and that's going to be team build. Now, as I have mentioned before, she is meta changing because after Silver Wolf has been released, there have been a lot of teams that is enabled where it was really tough to actually use them before. So from the look of all this, guys, Silver Wolf is definitely a perfect character when it comes to mono teams because of her skills of enabling weakness debuff onto your enemies. So building a team around Silver Wolf seems pretty easy because you can just slot the same character element onto the team and they will do well. Of course, we're still going to be needing characters such as healer and defender, and some teams are still lacking that at this point in time. For example, like a mono quantum team where they're lacking healers and defender. So some teams are still not viable right now because we are still in the earlier game. However, that doesn't really mean that you have to be using Silver Wolf in the mono team at this point, and there's still some perfect mix and match team, especially when it comes to free-to-play players. For example, like Sushang, Silver Wolf, March 7th, and Natasha is going to be a decent, physical team you can build around, because generally we are using 4-star character that you can get during your gameplay. However, guys, if for example, if you have been pulling for Zila and Jingyuan, then a team that I have been using currently myself is going to be Zila, Silver Wolf, Bailu, and Jingyuan. We're going to be focusing on 2 elements of Quantum and Electro, and they are doing pretty decently well, especially when we have erudition character like Jingyuan to help us clear out a lot of mobs enemies. And of course, you need Bailu as well, which you may or may not have depending on your luck when it comes to standard banner pools. And currently, the mono team that I feel there's going to be a lot of potential at this point in time is going to be Electro, where you run with Jingyuan, Bailu, Tingyun, and Silver Wolf. Very nice debuff alongside with enhancing attack for Jingyuan as well as Bailu for the healer. Perfect mono team you can run at this point in time. But other than that, the other majority of mono team are still lacking in some characters for you to run it completely. So guys, overall, what do I think of Silver Wolf? I think that she's a very lovely character, very enjoyable to listen to, especially if you are listening to her in English voice acting. I think that her voice is pretty sweet, and if you're actually reading her text messages, it is actually very fun to use a lot of gamers language, and it feels very familiar to us because again, we are gamers. And also, guys, her kit I feel that's going to be staying for a long time because I don't think there's going to be characters that's going to be replacing her in any time soon. So technically speaking, speaking, she's kind of like future proof. However, at this point in time, she's not at her maximum potential, especially when you're at earlier on in the game. You're not going to be able to make use of her a lot if you are missing out on effect hit rate stat on her build. But of course, whenever you're already able to build her to her maximum, she's going to be helping out your team a ton, especially when you're up against boss fight where you don't have the specific element that you have. But now she's going to be able to help your team out with that specifically. So guys, that's all I have to say on Silver Wolf at this point in time. I really love playing around with her. Very fun character, especially when we have the event that actually gives her a very good light cones for you to use. And so leave it down in the comment section what you guys think of Silver Wolf and whether or not you have been able to pull for her, guys. But right now, if you're still stuck on whether to pull Silver Wolf or Locha, I have a really in-depth video into that where you can actually check it out. And again guys, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. I am posting a lot of Honkai style video alongside with Genshin Impact, and we do have a lot of giveaways on our server, Discord and channel, so that's going to be a lot more beneficial for you, and also a free way to support my channel and continue my YouTube work. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me till this part of the video, guys, and with that I wish you a super day, and I will catch you on my next video.